Hello, St. John. We have today here Nesbit Dasher, who is a medical doctor. He's a gastroenterologist, and today we are going to talk about physical healing. Thank you for joining us today, Nesbit.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
So tell us, please, how did you get involved in being a medical doctor?
Well, I'd love to tell you that as a child I was an altruist and I always wanted to help people, but that's not the case. I was a typical kid, but my mother had always instilled in my brother and me the fact that she thought we were smart enough to become physicians, and she felt that one of her life's goals was to have two sons who were doctors. She was the daughter of a physician. She was the granddaughter of a physician and the great-granddaughter of a physician. And the only mistake that my grandfather, her father, made was he never had a son. He had 4 daughters, all of whom were smart. And that day and age, women did not go into medicine. So she felt that it was her obligation to restart the physician tradition in the Dasher family. My brother and I both became doctors. My brother continues the tradition. Both of his children are doctors. So I got to college, University of Georgia. My freshman advisor sits me down and he says, well, what do you see as your career? And I said, well, I don't know any better. I'll just tell you I want to be a doctor. It was just burned into my brain. So he set out a course for me to follow, and I did. I actually majored in math, ended up in medicine, and what a gift. I always thank my mother. It was the greatest gift she ever gave me.
Wow.
Was the ability to participate in an ancient profession that gives us the ability to hold hands with people and help them along the way. As physicians, we're not healers. So I'm not a healer, I'm a hand holder.
Wow.
And I'll give you an example. In junior and senior year of medical school, you have many opportunities to do things that doctors do, one of which is to learn how to sew up a laceration. So I'm working in the emergency room, a patient comes in with a bad cut to their arm. The healing process has already started. The blood vessels have constricted, warning the platelets that they need to clog the vessel. The platelets release factors that bring about this amazing cascade of blood clotting that occurs. And so by the time the patient gets to the ER, the only thing I can do to help that healing along is to approximate the edges of the wound.
Okay.
That's all I do. All I do is make your body look a little better when God finishes the healing process. The patient leaves the emergency room, comes back a couple of weeks later, stitches are out. Have I done anything about the healing? Not a thing. I've been a cosmetic surgeon is what I've been. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, is why we as physicians are hand holders.
Yes.
And not healers.
And that puts a lot of trust in God, knowing that God has created our bodies to do this beautiful healing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. So if somebody wants to be physically healed, what is required for that? What does one need in order to be healed physically?
One, you need a good attitude.
Okay.
You need a good attitude. You need to be healthy in mind, body, and spirit. In terms of the body, it's critical. Good health is important to healing. As I say, the doctor will come along and provide maybe an antibiotic in the case of an infection, or a broken arm, put you in a cast, but the healing all takes place from those 35 to 40 trillion cells that are in our bodies. So our job is to maintain our bodies. This is my grandmother talking now. Get plenty of rest, get your 7 or 8 hours sleep every night, eat healthily. What do I mean by a healthy diet? Healthy diet consists of a lot of protein, lean meats, fish, eggs, poultry, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and healthy carbohydrates. And by healthy carbohydrates, I mean a slice of whole grain, whole wheat bread, and not a slice of chocolate cake. Okay, so diet, rest, exercise. And not just cardio. I know everybody focuses on the cardio, but I'm telling you, strength training is just as important as cardio. I've got my wife even convinced of that. She now lifts weights, light weights, but she's now lifting weights and finds that her body is treating her better than it ever has before. And then fourth and finally, you've got to be at peace with yourself, with your family, with your friends, and with the rest of the world. And I find that some form of meditation and or prayer every day is the way to do that.
Tell us about a time that you have seen physical healing take place.
Well, there's one story that stands out. When I learned that I was going to do this little session, immediately came to mind a lady who was referred to us years ago from a small town in South Carolina. She'd been seen in the emergency room near her hometown and sent home. She had returned to the emergency room nearly dead a few hours later and was referred to us. I think we got the call about mid-morning. She arrived about noon. We weren't sure what was wrong. She was the wife of a minister of a tiny church over in rural South Carolina. I can't even remember the town now. And I spent most of the day with her. I still, I'd send her down for a CAT scan, and while the CAT scan was going on, I'd go see a few patients, and I'd come back, check that result, send her off for this or that. And by about sundown, we knew what was wrong with her. She had a perforated esophagus. It's called Boerhaave syndrome. And it can happen anytime, but when you violently vomit, this can occur. And that's what had happened to her, and it had gone unrecognized. And she was near death. And she ended up in the ICU for about 2 months, most of that time on a ventilator, unable to breathe for herself, unconscious. And as the team gathered to see her every day, I was the only one who believed that she was going to make it.
Wow.
There was also somebody else who thought she was going to make it. Her husband and the members of that tiny congregation. They gathered for prayer every day. And it was such a blessing for me to see them out there in the waiting room doing their bit. She did recover. She ended up with complications. From that kind of injury, you just can't escape from complications. So that I had the pleasure of seeing her about once or twice a year for the next 20 years of her life. She ultimately died of one of those complications, of a lung complication of that injury. But that family meant so much to me early in my career, to see the power of prayer, the power of persistence, and the minor role that I could play. Basically just my strong desire to see her well.
Right.
Anyway, that's that story.
Yeah, and I'm sure it helped them knowing that their physician was praying for them and believed fully that she would heal.
Oh yeah. We often prayed together.
Yeah.
In the waiting room, or at the bedside.
Yeah. So you've talked about hand-holding and the beautiful bodies that heal ourselves that God created, and about faith. So we've been talking in worship about healing and Jesus and how he heals people. So what does your role as a physician have to do with Jesus's power of healing?
Well, as I say, all we can do is do a little patchwork here and there. Most of the disorders that I treated as a gastroenterologist, the really serious ones, were from an overactive immune system. A trigger, an unknown trigger, causes the inflammatory process to set off against our own body's cells. autoimmune hepatitis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. The only thing we as physicians can do in those disorders is to hope that we can get the patient into remission by blocking some of those immune cascades that are trying to help us heal and yet are fighting the body. So again, we're not really healers. That power comes from God. It comes from the amazing body that sometimes gets off track, and the only thing that I can do as a physician is pray that the little bit of effort that I put into this is going to allow God to do His amazing work.
Well, good. Thank you for your faithful witness and for your role in, helping people through that process of physical healing.
Thank you. Glad to be here.